What is up, guys? It is Wednesday, January 25th. This is the Casual Wrestling Daily Podcast. Before we jump into tonight's show, make sure to hit the like button if you are watching us on YouTube. And if you are listening on Spotify or any other podcast network, feel free to leave us a nice 5-star review. Quick shout out to this week's Patreon producers, Brandon Ruffin, Jay by Proxy, Muscle Fiend 53, Randall Beatley, OG Ian the Noobs Newberry, and OG It's Zinny. Shout out to you guys for supporting the show. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the Rumble report tonight. There's a few things that I wanted to talk about, a few changes that I'm going to experiment with here on the podcast. The last couple of weeks, I think, in the last couple of episodes especially, you guys have seen that I've begun experimenting with animation. And ever since I started doing podcast or doing some of this, this creative outlet stuff, I had always thought that it would be interesting to do some sort of animated show, animated podcast or episodic television show, something like that. That was always what I really wanted to do. Somehow I stumbled into video game podcasting, which then rolled into wrestling podcast. And but the goal was always to do something animated. It's what I wanted to do my whole life. And I never thought that something on that scale could be possible for one person to be able to do the animation, the voice work, the editing, all in a speedy enough manner to produce I thought a weekly show, but more than that, a daily podcast. And in the last couple of weeks, I have basically taught myself how to do it. And I've always prided myself on pushing my limits and breaking things that I once thought were impossible. And I've just really put my nose down and figured out how to do it. So here's the thing that I'm a little bit nervous to talk about because I don't know what the reception's going to be. I want to take this podcast in a full animation direction. I want the podcast and the channel to go 100% animation. And I know that might seem weird for a podcast, but it's just for a creative outlet, it's something that I want to do. I want to animate the daily show and do it more as like a cartoon podcast. I know that sounds so stupid, but I think that from a marketing standpoint, I think it can just look so different than everything else that's out there, right? I mean, there's a couple things I'm running into. Number one, doing the video podcast and editing these large video files, I'm literally, I record this usually around 11 o'clock at night, and sometimes I'm not going to sleep until 5 a.m. trying to handle these video size files and doing all the editing. I do everything by myself, and it takes a long time, and I figured out a way to do the animation in a much faster and more manageable method. So that's one reason. The second reason is that I am actually getting into a new business venture that is going to force me into traveling a lot more in 2023. So I won't just be, I just won't be at, my studio all the time, every day of the week. So there will be times where I would only be able to do an audio podcast anyway. And the fact that I could throw, a mixer and a microphone in a suitcase and record from a hotel or record from maybe even like live locations and then turn that into animation, I think that's an interesting possibility. But it's hard because it's an extreme change to go from, being on camera every night to talking to you guys every night to going, all right, we're just going to completely change the direction of the show. But the kind of second point of emphasis I wanted to make here, and I do want feedback. Like, I want you guys to genuinely tell me if I'm just way off basis. Is this just a completely insane thing to take a show that's a video show and try to spin it into something new? But I've always, I assume you guys aren't watching the podcast for my pretty face. It's the things I say, And the set has always given credibility to the show, but I don't believe that like being on video makes the show necessarily better. It's a video version of the podcast. I think that animation could be an interesting way to present the show, but I don't know if this has ever really been done on a large scale by one person, and it's something I want to attempt to do. I want to see where we can take it. The whole point of this has always been to just see where this would go. And this is kind of the direction I want to go in right now. Here's the problem. There's 500 wrestling podcasts in the world, right? And, every time that this show starts to lean more into the just, talking about wrestling, you get into where you're competing with the Eric Bischoffs of the world and the Jim Cornettes of the world. And you're just talking and talking and talking. And I don't want to fall into that category. I want to stand out. I want to look different. And I think this gives me an opportunity to do something just different. Now, we'll still record some video stuff from time to time. I won't tear down the studio or anything, but I think it will be more and more the daily podcast will become this visually cartoon. I don't even like cartoon, animated aesthetic that you'll see on a daily basis. But one of the biggest benefits from converting over to the animated show will be I'll be able to get more guests involved based on the fact that, I'll be real honest here. I hate video chatting. I hate the idea of having someone on the podcast and having to look them in the eyes while we're on podcast. I don't do well with that kind of interaction. I do well with in person, and I do well, audio, like on the phone, but I hate FaceTime. I hate video chatting with people. So it's why I've shied away from ever really having people on the show. So if I do it this way, we could just do audio calls and Skype calls and then convert those over to, I could animate, and it's just another creative outlet, right? It gives me the opportunity to hone my skills and animate guests for the show. And that goes for anybody, right? Anybody who listens to the show who wants to come on and talk wrestling, it would be way easier to make that happen. And so I want you guys to kind of kick that around because, this podcast or the show, whatever this is, I've never really known what it is. I feel like it's a podcast, but it was never meant to be a business. It was always meant to be my creative outlet that kind of just grew legs. And it started making business sense at one point. It started people were asking for certain things that a business would do. But before it grows too far in a direction that I can't turn it around, I want to at least attempt this. And just see, maybe do it for a month and see what happens and see how people respond and see if it works out. And so we'll kind of roll with that, right? And moving forward for future episodes, I'm going to tighten them up a little bit. I think 20 to 30 minutes is the sweet spot. I think that's the most digestible length for a podcast to listen to me rant. I am definitely going to reach out to content creators that I like to listen to, and I'm going to ask them to do a daily segment on the show. I want 5 segments that I can lock in every week that you guys can expect from people like Jay Knows Wrestling and other content creators that I enjoy, that we can know, Jay Knows Wednesdays or something like that. So I know this is a kind of long state of the show opening, but I think it's always kind of important to me to talk about what's going on in my head and to kind of get your guys' feedback, because you guys have been extremely helpful in guiding me. Because I didn't know how to do YouTube. I didn't know how to, I had done podcasts. My background is in audio engineering and set design and AV production. And so we just kind of threw this together, and this has grown into the monster that it is. And I just want to try this out. So I want to hear from you guys. Tell me, is this a bad idea? Should we scrap it or do we try it for a month and see what happens? All right, first up, we have to talk about the AEW debut of Mark Briscoe. He got to honor his late brother Jay in an emotional tribute, and it was clear that the Briscoe brothers will always hold a special place in the hearts of wrestling fans. That match was a tough watch for me. And I don't mean that in any kind of disrespectful or negative way. I mean, like, I'm not a sensitive person, but that match left like a deep lump in my throat. Seeing Jay Lethal cry, the initial handshake, oh man, ooh. That's what a tribute show was supposed to look like. That was 100% class by AEW. Tony Khan nailed that on the head. It still pisses me off that someone had to die for a Briscoe to be on AEW Dynamite, but damn, man, that was special. The roster on the ramp at the end of the show, never once did it feel overproduced or corny or even like something done for attention. I do believe that Tony Khan has a real respect for the sport of wrestling. I think that AEW is the more pure wrestling product for the more pure wrestling fan. And if Tony Khan can come to terms with that, I think that he could do something really special long term. But he's just got to quit chasing the WWE dragon. You know, I didn't have much experience watching the Briscoes, so I can't speak real deeply to this, but what I can tell you is that I thought Mark was an impressive wrestler. And I don't know how much of that is emotion or how much of that is just maybe me wanting him to put on a good show, but I enjoyed seeing him wrestle. But the thing about what happened last night that we can't let slide is outside of that impressive finish to the night, the show was another one of those, I could have skipped it. You know, the Jericho match was fun. It wasn't overly meant for casual fans, I don't think. The Darby House of Black stuff just isn't my cup of tea. The Jungle Hook stuff isn't holding my attention. Bryan Danielson's always fun to watch, but like the booking with the Blackpool Combat Club is a mess right now. Are they with him or are they not? When he's getting jumped and they are nowhere to be seen, like they need to tie up some loose ends in AEW. You can't call long-term storytelling just fucking not addressing something and then later on coming back to it. That's not long-term storytelling. That's just being messy. The Soho and Storm stuff, I thought I thought that match missed Britt Baker. I definitely think it missed Britt Baker. I think that for me, it immediately was I could pick up my phone and scroll TikTok now because this isn't something that I'm going to be interested in. And then, like I said, the finish of the show was amazing and brought it all back, and it was awesome to watch. So, problem with AEW right now, it's so hit and miss for me. If the right names aren't on the show, I'm really not paying attention. But let's move on to some more business here. As of today, Vince McMahon is currently facing a third lawsuit, and nobody knows what's going to come of any of this. But it does feel like the public perception is that most people don't want Vince back in the WWE at this point. So, we know the first lawsuit was filed by a stockholder who basically claimed Vince McMahon was bullying the board and changing the bylaws to essentially reinstate himself into power. And then we got the second very similar lawsuit, which was filed by the Detroit Police and Fire Retirement System Investment Fund, which owns WWE stock and essentially claimed the same thing, bullying his way back into the company. But now we have this third new lawsuit that is actually a little bit different. It's geared more towards the covering up of sexual abuse allegations on Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon allegedly paid a sum believed to be in the millions of dollars to settle a claim of alleged rape brought against him by former referee Rita Chatterton, even though Vince claims that it was just to get it over with. He's not admitting guilt. It amazes me how somebody like Vince McMahon seems to be able to shield the WWE television product away from the WWE business entity. That doesn't happen anywhere else. You look in pro basketball, pro football, when an owner does something stupid, like says something racist, it affects from the top to the bottom the league. It affects the team. It affects the owner. It affects everybody. But it's almost like Vince McMahon has found a way to be a part of WWE while also disconnecting himself from the company. Because every Monday and every Friday we tune in like nothing is wrong. And there's literally a shitstorm happening outside of the offices of WWE, but we continue to watch and just enjoy a product pretending, I don't know, are we pretending or are we just turning a blind eye to everything that's going on? But my question is, how long can Vince McMahon shield the television product from the criticism? How long do these lawsuits last when the people who are suing realize how much money they're going to make from Vince McMahon selling the company? I don't understand one thing, which is ultimately I do believe most people buy stocks to turn a profit. And you've got to know that if Vince McMahon is in talks with the Saudi Public Investment Fund and Disney and Fox and NBC Comcast, he's about to make these people a lot of money. Like the stock buyout is going to be ridiculous. I don't know what they're all so mad about, but they're all mad. And so how long can he shield the television product from these people gaining traction with audience members? Forget bulletproof Sami Zayn. Sometimes I wonder if it's not bulletproof Vince McMahon. He just keeps pushing the ball forward like nothing is even happening. It's crazy, man. In other news, Tony Khan is on board with the idea of a World Cup of pro wrestling. He knows it wouldn't be easy to get the WWE on board with working with All Elite and New Japan Pro, but he's open to working with anybody for the greater good. Come on, man. This benefits WWE 0%. These are the things that Tony Khan comes out and speaks about that he's got to just learn to leave alone, because they're not smart public statements. WWE stands to gain absolutely nothing from joining a World Cup, some kind of tournament that all wrestlers would compete in. WWE already sells itself on being the company with all the best wrestlers in the world. So if you think for a minute they are going to acknowledge that there is a world where wrestlers and other companies are as talented as the roster they have, you're crazy, man. You're crazy. WWE can and just did their own SmackDown World Cup. And to be honest, it's not that interesting. It's not that entertaining. Sure, like fans will get a bunch of dream matches and they want a bunch of dream matches, but WWE has an obligation to carry itself like the most prestigious wrestling company in the world. And that means not playing nice with the smaller fish in the pond. WWE is not going to make a habit of allowing its wrestlers to wrestle in outside promotions unless that outside promotion somehow absolutely benefits the WWE in some way. I think it's safe to assume that they easily could have held on to Sasha Banks if they had just let her go do New Japan Pro Wrestling shows while still under WWE contract. But this doesn't really work. And this doesn't even really work for AEW, right? They try this all the time. Every time one of the AEW main roster, like main attractions, goes off and does some kind of indie show, it in a way devalues the product that they're putting out to the world. WWE would want every one of their WWE guys or girls to be booked to go over. There's not a chance WWE lets one wrestler in WWE lose to somebody in AEW. It's just not going to happen. So I don't see any possible way. I don't know what Tony Khan's talking about. I don't see any possible way a World Cup based on scripted sports benefits anybody other than just the fans who want these wild ass dream matches. That's it. And speaking of AEW, Britt Baker didn't compete on tonight's episode of AE Dynamite due to an injury. The company broke the news this morning on its Twitter account. AEW wanted Baker to compete in a three-way match against Ruby Soho and Toni Storm on tonight's episode of Dynamite. Since Baker is injured, Soho and Storm competed in a singles match. It's unclear what the severity of the injury is or how long Baker will be out of action. Her last match was against, I don't know who that was, on AEW Dark on January 24th. Baker took a kick to the face that caused her nose to bleed during the match. AEW hasn't shared if it's a nose injury or if there is another issue. I mean, it's unfortunate. This is unfortunate for AEW. It's not, it's never good to lose one of your biggest stars, but here's the bigger issue, I think. It's felt like AEW was setting up this whole outsiders versus homegrown angle. And then you get one of your biggest homegrown stars injured. I don't know what that does to the story, but the bigger problem is this story got so convoluted tonight. It got so fucking messy that I don't know going forward how they salvage this. The announcers were desperately trying to sell it. They were trying to make sense of it, but even I think as they talked, they were talking themselves into this idea of like, this is crazy, right? Because Ruby Soho is an outsider. She came from WWE, but because of respect, she sides with the originals. Then you have Hikaru Shida, who is an original, but sides with the outsiders. Maybe they can figure out how to right this ship and make it feel less messy, but it just, to me, it felt like just a train wreck, like a straight up clusterfuck, man. It really looks to me, when I look at AEW's women's roster, they have 1, 2, 3 possible big names that can get casual fans interested. Outside of that, what they have right now is a good solid core of women's wrestlers. Not big names, not ticket movers, but a core. What AEW needs is 1 or 2 more mega level stars in the women's division to really kind of round out the roster. And it appears to me like Mercedes Moné is really that person. She would be a good fit in AEW. The more I look at it, I really think that they could benefit from signing her, and it would just give them that little bit of like oomph they need in the division. And if they could find one more, if they could pluck one more kind of, it's got to be an A-level star into the company. But right now, like, the real star in AEW is Britt Baker. You guys could argue this all you want with me. I will argue it till my death. The biggest women's star in AEW is Britt Baker. It's not Jamie Hayter. It's not Saraya. It's not Toni Storm. It's not Ruby Soho. It's Britt Baker. She is the biggest star, and possibly like probably in the top 3 just of everybody in AEW. And then I will make that argument probably till the day I die. I'm hoping at some point we get Britt Baker turning on Jamie Hayter sooner or later so that we could get a second Britt Baker title run. I'm ready for it. Last story tonight, Ric Flair issued an apology to Becky Lynch backstage at this week's Raw XXX anniversary show. This week, Flair was backstage for the special Raw XXX anniversary that featured several legends returning to the event. Speaking on his podcast, To Be the Man, Flair talked about his experience backstage at the show. Flair said he spoke with both Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch, apologizing to the latter over their spat regarding the Man moniker. Cool. I'm good with it, right? It's good to clear the air. Hopefully, this can clear up some of the bad blood between Charlotte and Becky. To me, Charlotte and Becky is the one real rivalry within WWE that they tend to kind of shy away from, but I think it has the possibility to be one of those generational stories that kind of transcend time. Kind of transcends wrestling generations that people can talk about for a long time, and they seem to kind of shy away from putting those two in the ring too much together. They keep them on separate shows, but I think that then this is me overreacting. This is me, jumping to the extreme. But I do believe, and people say this all the time, but I believe that Charlotte and Becky Lynch could end up in the same atmosphere as like Stone Cold and The Rock, Cena and Randy Orton, Hogan and Andre the Giant. For what we have in modern day wrestling, I think that's the closest thing that we could have to that. And I know there's a lot of people who are going to laugh at what I just said, and I might make myself laugh a little bit, but it is rare when you have two possible people in the GOAT conversation, in the apex of their careers, actually wrestling at the same time. That's not a common thing anywhere, right? In any sport. For them to kind of line up and come to their own at the same time in different ways, it's a pretty unique situation. But here's the thing. I still wish WWE would adopt a 3-tier title system, a 3-tier title structure, one mega title for both the women's and men's division. We'll call that the WWE Grand Champion. And you make that the biggest, gaudiest belt that you have carried around to every news network and television. Anybody who will take a picture with that thing, you have it. It's got to have so many diamonds and stones. That's the Grand Champion. That can be your Roman Reigns. That can be your part-timer. That can be your guy who wrestles four times a year for the biggest prize in WWE. Outside of that, in tier structure number 2, you have a Raw and SmackDown Men's Championship and a Raw and SmackDown Women's Championship. And those titles can be seen as equals. But they take away the goofy names of like Universal and WWE title. Those are goofy. It should be a Raw Men's Championship and a Raw Women's Championship, a SmackDown Men's Championship, and a SmackDown Women's Championship. And then each show should have a corresponding mid-card title. I think that maybe the men's mid-card be on Monday Night Raw and the women's be on SmackDown, right? And have one mid-card per division. And that's it, tag team titles. And that would be, to me, the ultimately best title system. But there has to be one ultimate prize in WWE. I don't like this idea that there's two titles that are on equal footing. And I still don't even like it, the fact that Roman's carrying around 2 belts. Unify those 2 titles. Create a Grand Champion and then introduce a Raw Men's Champion and a SmackDown Men's Champion. And give us that ultimate prize. Let us see one person like trying to be the ultimate champion. I like that. That's what I like. I'm tired of these titles holding the same amount of weight. All right, let's transition now into our guest segment of the show with a trip to the dirt sheets with J-Nose Wrestling and a segment that I'm going to title J-Nose Wednesdays.
Hey, it's your boy Jay, bona fide member of the Dirt Sheet Press, and here are some of the goings-on in pro wrestling that you may have missed this week, being a casual wrestling fan. And first off, if you've been enjoying the WWE as of late, don't worry, it doesn't seem like it will be changing anytime soon. A lot of people feared that during Vince McMahon's hostile takeover, he would once again be taking over creative. Turns out there has been several meetings and several assurances that everything on the creative side of WWE will remain as is. Other WWE news. The Cody Rhodes spoiler that the WWE gave that he will be an entrant in this year's Royal Rumble was done because the WWE believe they have huge surprises in store, and it is more than enough, so they were more than happy to go ahead and release the fact that Cody Rhodes will be an entrant this year. Also, Raw 30 XXX is going to have a so-called acknowledgement ceremony with the Bloodline. It's making people think that The Rock may be showing up as the WWE just dropped new Rock merchandise on WWEshop.com. The Rock merchandise happens to be hoodies. which you do need in the winter, so don't know why that's that crazy, but it's making the rumor mill get a turning. In AEW news, it seems as if Brody Lee will be having his own documentary made about his life coming next February. It is unclear where this documentary will be able to be seen at, but it is not being made by AEW. And also in AEW news, Adam Cole is actually not 100% cleared to wrestle, as he announced last week on Dynamite. If you notice, on this week's Dynamite, Adam Cole was not there. He still has restrictions on him, and one of those restrictions actually stops him from traveling. So hopefully Adam Cole will be good enough to wrestle soon, so he could follow through with the announcement he made just last week that he's ready to take on the entire AEW roster. And those just aren't the facts, those are the dirty facts. The Dirt Sheet News! Was that not enough Vince news for you? Well, I got a little bit more. Turns out several in WWE are on edge, as Vince McMahon has been sending notes to several departments within WWE telling them that they are not doing their jobs properly. Vince McMahon is especially angry with the PR department because of the way they handled his controversy and the way he departed the company. A lot of people believe, though, it is because the PR department didn't make it seem seamless and easy to handle when Vince McMahon came back to WWE. There's also rumors going about that Vince McMahon may soon be firing several backstage in WWE amongst those different departments. Nick Khan, the now sole CEO of WWE, said that the sale to Saudi Arabia story was a 100% fabricated lie. He believes it was made up by someone to tarnish the reputation of the WWE and Vince McMahon himself. Vince McMahon has also settled a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against him by one of his accusers, former WWE referee. But those just aren't the facts. Those are some more dirty facts. The Dirt Sheet News!
All right, so back to your regularly scheduled podcast here. I'm going to start doing Hall of Fame worthy Wednesday. I read an article with John Morrison that gave me this idea, and so let's lead into that with WWE's Hall of Fame has always been a controversial subject, right? Many wrestling talents over the years have questioned its credibility over the lack of any real criteria for inductees. John Morrison is one of those people who doesn't care about an induction because he thinks that it's completely political and made up. The former WWE star recently spoke with Chris Van Vliet. Among other things, the former ECW champion was asked if he thinks he had a Hall of Fame career. Morrison replied by saying that he doesn't care about it. Okay, so he doesn't care about it. And he believes it's political. I got a fix for it. We'll take care of it on this show. We'll induct people into the Hall of Fame. I think we're fully credible of doing that as a casual wrestling podcast. I mean, we already had the whole conversation on this show about who should and shouldn't be in the Women's Hall of Fame, right? I think we ran that down a couple months ago. But the truth is, how do you measure the value of a wrestling career? I mean, do you add more weight to the titles won? To the matches that are won, to the biggest storylines, to the biggest WrestleMania moments? Do you add merch sales? What actually qualifies someone to go into the WWE Hall of Fame? And so, you know, what? Do you need an unbiased committee? Nah, forget that. You don't need an unbiased committee. Do you put 10 names out for people to vote on? Nah, forget that. We'll do it here. We'll just do it here. I'll state the case. I'll give my opinion, and then I'll put it up for a vote. And we, as a casual wrestling community, will create the Casual Wrestling Hall of Fame. So our first possible inductee, which I don't know how we got here, but this is our first person up for induction, is going to be John Morrison. Now let's take a quick glance at John Morrison's resume. 1-time ECW champion, 4-time tag team champion, 3-time intercontinental champion. Now I'm only going off, y'all know, I'm only going off of the Big Show. But not the Big Show, but the WWE. That's the accomplishments that matter to me in AEW. But I don't think he has AEW accomplishments. Is one ECW title run, is that enough? Does that qualify? Are we going to qualify that as a major title run? I don't think I am. I think that's a sub-major if I'm having to put things into categories. ECW title is a sub-major title run. A major title run, you have to have held the World Heavyweight title, the WWE title, or the Universal title. There's just not enough. There's just not enough there for me to be in the Hall of Fame if you haven't had one of those titles. So I think by default right now, unless I can, come up with a better case, I don't think he's in. I don't think 4 tag team title runs, I don't think that gets you in. I don't think 3 IC championship runs, I don't think that gets you in. I just don't, not in modern day. I think if you look back far enough, 3 Intercontinental Championship runs could be viewed as enough. But I think in modern wrestling, the way the Intercontinental title is treated, I just don't think that's enough to get you into the Hall of Fame. So my question right now, based on the evidence provided, do you guys think that John Morrison has done enough in his career to be inducted into the casual wrestling's version of the WWE Hall of Fame? Let me know in the comments your guys' thoughts. And that is all I got for you guys tonight. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for more casual wrestling news and wrestling content. If you have any comments for tonight's show, which I know this is different, let me know. Voice them in the comment section. But as always, I am the Notorious Nerdy D, and it is time to ring the final bell.
Step in the ring, if you ready, let's go. Ay, casual wrestling community show. You already know, talking WWE. Keep it rolling and hosted by Notorious Nerdy D. Ay, dope show that you gon' find. Tune in cause it's online. Hit 'em with a figure 4 leg lock, power driver or clothesline. We bringing that heat like the show, but you should